I have enjoyed viewing your vlogs and reading your peer responses. It is clear you have all grasped the idea that curriculum design is intricate, challenging, and without a set right answer. I hope you will find backward design to be a helpful process. The benefit of backward design is that it's open to infusing many different approaches to music teaching and curriculum development. And as Jen points out in her vlog, visualizing the end and then working backward extends far beyond educational contexts. After reflecting upon your reactions to introductory unit content and your teaching experience descriptions, I noticed some important themes that may shape future course discussion. There was much talk about assessment, contextual learning, and the interest in placing our students at the center of curricular decisions. I'll respond to each of those themes. Let's start with assessment. Some of you mentioned that the intense focus on assessment in educational policy has left a sour taste in your mouth. Yes, the focus has definitely shifted in recent years toward purposeful student assessment. We know that this may range from standardized tests to informal classroom observations. And the emphasis on assessment is largely due to emerging research on instructional best practice. Regardless of the current trend in heavy assessment, it seems you all would agree that assessment is a necessary part of teaching. How then can we purposefully seek evidence of student learning? I've actually learned much about assessment from an unlikely source, from preschool teachers in the towns of Reggio Emilia and Pistoia, Italy. There, teachers systematically document, preserve, and share evidence of student learning with children, colleagues, administrators, parents, and community members. They call this process making learning visible. Further, they use that documentation of student learning and their reflection on that learning evidence to plan future learning experiences for their students. So my question to you is, how can you make learning visible, and perhaps in our case audible, to your students and others? How can you make assessment authentic, as Cassie mentions in her blog? And if students are at the center of instructional design, how can we view assessment as a means of ensuring that they remain at the center instead of moving to the side? How can we use assessment to plan meaningful instruction instead of moving aimlessly from project to project, as Kim mentions? Several of you commented on the importance of designing contextual learning experiences. For example, Adam mentioned guiding students to learn scales within the context of a piece of repertoire rather than as an isolated activity. John Dewey advocates for contextual learning experiences in school that mirror issues students face in the real world. Regarding planning contextual music experiences, Lisa questions, does repertoire selection drive skill and knowledge development, or does skill and knowledge development drive repertoire selection? And that question is extremely relevant in today's music educational discourse. So let's consider what drives music. For the moment, let's approach music instruction from a Western tonal music perspective. There's many different cultural perspectives we could take. But in Western tonal music practices, music is largely a repertoire-based practice. So these music concepts that many of you discussed in your vlogs, where do they come from? Well, they come from the repertoire. They have emerged based on principles or big ideas found in most or in all of Western tonal music. So let's take an example. An example would be harmonic structure. Let's use 1-4-5-1 as an example. That structure is considered important in our culture because it is prevalent. Students could learn that structure through learning a Beatles tune or a piece by Mozart or even a folk song. So perhaps it's not as important to determine if the concept comes before the repertoire selection or if the repertoire selection comes first, but to determine how students can transfer certain skills and knowledge, in this case a familiar harmonic structure, to many different pieces, and eventually to composing their own piece based on that harmonic structure, empowering students to contribute musically to our society. The concept of learning, defined as a transfer of understanding, is central to backward design. Now, the last theme, placing our students at the core of curricular decisions. We hear this a lot in American educational discourse, but what does it really mean? Josh makes the point in his vlog that there is sometimes a disconnect between the theoretical and the practical. So I'll use myself as an example of this. During the first 2 years of my teaching in the public schools, I believed and learned that music creativity should be at the core of instruction. And I thought I infused music creativity into daily interactions with my students. But then one day, I began more formally assessing student learning, and it turned out there was little to no music creativity infused within daily instruction. What a mind-blowing experience for me. In other words, what I thought the students were learning and what I thought I was assessing informally through observation was not actually present. So that brings me back to the question, what does it mean to place students at the center of curricular decisions, as Angela suggests? And how are we or how are we not doing this in our classrooms? One of the toughest yet greatest parts about reflecting upon curricular design and implementation is that it prompts us to take an up-close and personal look at what and how we are teaching. Ongoing reflection typically leads to more purposeful and meaningful learning experiences for our students. Shannon told a powerful story about spontaneously infusing student creativity and interest into instruction, and how that experience prompted student inquiry and transfer of concepts previously learned in classes. So how can we make those types of experiences more like the norm instead of happy coincidences? Carrie mentions the additional challenges of teaching in an educational system that's perhaps not even designed for developmentally appropriate practice. How do we, as quality controllers, empower each other to find creative ways to bring our students back to the center in the midst of appeasing other stakeholders, as Mel mentions, and working within our societal, economic, and political parameters? Your reflections inspire me to end with a video essay by Grammy Award-winning music educator Kent Knappenberger, a Western New Yorker. His video essay touches on many points you have raised during your vlogs and perhaps inspires us to find creative ways to meet the needs and interests of our stakeholders. Click on the link provided in my email to view this essay, and I look forward to continuing our discussion online.